Hey everyone, welcome to the channel for another Escape from Tarkov video. In this one, I'll be talking about some tips for rushing the Shoreline Resort and making some serious money while doing it. The resort is one of the most hotly contested loot spots in all of Tarkov, and for good reason. It's one of, if not the most densely packed treasure troves of loot in the entire game, and a good run can single-handedly send you from broke to being one of the richest people in Tarkov if you get lucky. Because of this, it's also a very dangerous place that's fought over tooth and nail by pretty much every player on the map. In this video, I'm going to talk about my personal strategies for getting to the resort, getting the juice, and getting out alive. This video will be broken up into sections that discuss the keys you need to get at the loot, the spawn points and which are ideal for pushing resort, the type of gear and weapons that I recommend bringing, and other tips such as using stimulants to beat all the other players to the door. I can't promise you 100% success, but if you take my advice and use it to your advantage, you'll be stuffing LEDX into your container before you know it. So with that intro out of the way, let's get into the main points of the video, starting off with a quick overview of what keys you'll want to get your hands on so you can access the loot, and then we'll go over the spawn points and which ones are ideal for pushing to the resort. First up for this video, I figured a quick guide on the keys you want for the resort is a good place to start. I'm not going to go into detail on the internal layout of the resort, but I will link another video of mine in the description that shows you around the inside. For this section, I just want to go over the key set that I use for Shoreline and which ones are the most important and valuable to loot first. The easiest way to get these is on the flea market, but you can also look up their spawn points on the wiki and try and farm them. Starting with the East Wing, which are the blue or purple keys, the most important ones to have are as follows: East Wing 222 or 226, 313 or 314, and the blue tape key, also known as Sanitar's office, which opens room 110 on the first floor. All three of these rooms have a decent chance for LEDX and other rare medical and barter loot, so they're on the top priority of the rooms that you should hit on the East Wing first. Next up, secondary keys for the East Wing include the 107 office key, 205 or 206, 308 or 306, 310, 316, and 328 or the utility closet key. These rooms aren't going to drop million ruble items, but they often have pretty valuable loot and are worth checking if you feel safe. The other important area to check in the East Wing is East 221, which is accessed through room 218, and it can have a keycard spawn on the table near the computer. For the West Wing keys, which are the pink or red keys, the most important ones here are the West Wing 301, 220, 216, and either 218, 221, or 222, which access the same three rooms. These rooms are all pretty stacked with valuable barter items, weapon parts, and even potentially a red keycard in room 218 on the blue water barrel. 301 is a fairly reliable LEDX spawn, so it's very important to check that room right away. Secondary keys for the West Wing include the Office 104 and 112 keys, as well as the Safe 321 key for the third floor. These rooms can spawn some pretty nice loot on occasion, especially Office 112, but generally I find them to be kinda lackluster and empty. One more important spot to check in the West Wing is the gym in the basement, which can spawn a red keycard in one of the open blue lockers, but this is incredibly rare. That pretty much covers it for the keys that I use in the resort. If you have the primary keys for each wing, you're pretty much set, but don't be afraid to try out other keys, including ones that I don't mention. It's rarely a bad thing to check more loot spots, and you can sometimes get lucky with spawns even in low tier rooms. Now that you have a good set of keys to open the locked doors inside of the resort, let's quickly go over the spawn points on Shoreline to get some directions on how to get to resort from each one and point out which spawn points are the best ones for a good rush on the resort. For this section, I'm going to start on the east side of the map because these spawns are best for pushing the resort and contain the two best spawn points on the map, which I'll go over first. To start this section off, we'll go over what I call the God spawns, which will generally be the first people to resort in almost every raid. First up, we have the spawns near the ruined house, commonly known as Granny's house, and in the rocks just north of the East Wing. These spawns are physically closer to the resort than any other spawns on the map, and generally these players will beat everyone else there. From here, just use your compass to point yourself east or southeast and you should see the resort right away. Next, you have the spawns near the radio tower, the arched rock, and along the fence north of the radio tower. These spawns are the second best, being close enough to the resort to beat out most other players. From these spawn points, use your compass to point yourself generally east or northeast and start sprinting under the power lines, and you should see the resort up on top of the hill right away. Finally, on the east side of the map, you can also spawn down near the shore, either by the guard towers or farther north near the road to customs extraction. These spawns are the worst for resort rushing on the east side, so don't expect to be the first one there. From these spawns, use your compass to point yourself generally east and slightly north and start sprinting. It might take a while, but you'll get there eventually. That's it for the east side spawns, so let's take a look at the west end now. This side of the map is going to have a longer run to the resort from pretty much every spawn point, but there is a few nice ones on this side for quick pushes as well. First up, we have 3 spawn points around the shore of the swamp and the flooded village. These spawns are in a similar area, and the farther west you spawn on the shore, the better luck you'll have. The best spawn out of these 3 is near a large rock and the power lines. From these spawns, you just want to get your compass pointed west and start sprinting. Head underneath the power lines and you should see the resort pretty soon. Next up, there is a whole bunch of spawn points in the village area, making it one of the most common spawns on the west side. These spawns are pretty far from resort, and you'll need to point your compass northwest and start sprinting fast to beat other players there. Finally, the last spawn points here are down by the tunnel extraction or just north of it. These are the farthest spawns on the west side, and you'll need to go pretty hard to the northwest to make it to the resort with any real speed. With that out of the way, let's talk about what kind of gear that I recommend bringing with you so you stand a chance at making it to the resort first and winning the inevitable PvP battles that happen inside. First up, we'll start with weapons and gear, and the general rule of thumb for Shoreline is that you want to run light and fast, meaning you don't want to take incredibly heavy armor with high movement penalties, and you don't want to take heavy, long-range weapons that can't fight around corners either. The idea behind this is pretty simple. The faster you move, the faster you'll get there, and the more likely you will get there first. Things like the Karasa, Trooper Armor, Gazelle, and armored rigs like the TacTech, M1, M2, or TV110 are all pretty good choices, but basically just avoid using things like the Gen 4 Full and 6B43, which reduce your movement speed by up to 40%. On top of this, you are always going to want a headset on Shoreline, because you need to be able to hear people running through the trees and around the resort, so don't wear helmets that don't allow you to use headsets. For a backpack, always bring at least a tri-zip or bigger to the resort so that you can pick up a lot of loot and make big profits on your runs. Otherwise, you waste a lot of time deciding what to bring and what to leave behind. Next, when it comes to weapons, you're going to want something that works well primarily in close range fights. Shoreline is a pretty huge map, so it's tempting to load up with snipers, but once you get inside the resort, you're fighting door to door in the hallways, and you want something full auto that you can use easily at close range. Full auto rifles like the AK, M4, HK416, and SA58 will all work really great, as do SMGs like the MP7 and MPX in the close range fights. Having a rifle means you can also take on long range fights outside the resort though, so keep that in mind. You're also going to always want to bring some grenades, which are incredibly useful in the resort for clearing rooms or throwing down hallways so you can escape while your enemy's taking cover. Finally, I highly recommend that you consider taking some stimulants into the raid with you if your goal is just to rush the resort and be the first one there. There's 2 stims that will really help you here, and those are SJ6 and L1 or norepinephrine. SJ6 is the stamina stim and will greatly increase your stamina and how far you can run on one bar. This can be purchased on the market or crafted in the hideout at the med station, and using this will save you about 30 seconds or more on running to the resort right from your spawn point. L1 or norepinephrine is a good one to add to the mix as well. This one makes you run slightly faster and also adds even more stamina to your bar, so combining this with SJ6 will save you about another 15 seconds when you rush to the resort right off spawn. Finally, the last stim that I highly recommend on pretty much any map is the Mule Stim, an expensive flea market item that massively increases your carrying capacity. This one is something to save in your container and use when you have a heavy backpack full of loot so you can run to extraction much more easily. With the right gear and stims, you have a better chance at both reaching resort first and winning the PvP fights in the narrow hallways. There's no hard and fast rules, but follow my advice and you'll be off to a pretty good start. To close off this video, I have a few extra little tips for you to consider. They're not specific to any one thing, so I'm lumping them together here at the end of the video. First up is to always use your ears in and around the resort. You can hear players approaching from outside from pretty far away, and once you understand where the entrances and exits are in each wing, you'll almost always know what door they'll be coming in through, so use this to your advantage and ambush them when they come in. Don't be too aggressive, let them come to you, and loot the place in peace once they're all dead. On the flip side of this, since everyone else else can easily hear you as well, it can be a good idea to move more slowly and steady in the resort so that other players can't hear you, allowing you to ambush them even easier. I already mentioned this next one a bit earlier, but make sure that you prioritize the most valuable rooms first and then loot the secondary rooms afterwards. If you get into East Wing, check 222 and Sanitar's office for LEDX immediately, and if you get into West Wing, check 301 for a LEDX and 218 for the red card right away, so that if you run into other players, you already have the best rooms looted. Finally, the last thing I can definitively say about looting Resort is that getting greedy will almost always get you killed, so know when you should just call it a win and get out of there with what you have. If you've got a LEDX in your container or a few graphics cards and you hear fighting on the other side of the building, there's no shame in leaving and making your money before coming back again. It can be very valuable to loot the entire building, but it's much safer to just loot one side and then leave. On this point, don't be afraid to pop a painkiller and yeet yourself off the balcony if you're trapped in a room and you need to escape. Most players won't see this move coming, and they don't have an easy way to get out and follow you, meaning you can often get out alive even in a really tough situation. Well, that pretty much covers it for these tips on how to rush Resort, what you should bring with you, and where you should loot to make some sweet LEDX money. Shoreline's my favorite map, and after playing it in tons of different ways, the straight up Resort Rush is in my experience the most fun and most profitable way to play the map. It's dangerous, but you can make millions every single raid if you get lucky. I hope this video is helpful to you, and hopefully these tips can help you get in on the LEDX Gold Rush, beat the Chads to the resort, and make you some money. Let me know what you think down below, and if you have any tips to add to this. Thanks for checking out the video. I've got links to my Twitch stream, Discord server, and Patreon page down below for anyone interested. And until next time, stay safe in Tarkov City.